Yeah,
I can't.
Because I've been cut already. I like cards.
Nobody.
I can see his
Bummers. I know. We should.
Make sure I sign one anyway. I'll sign.
Pittman, has got something special. I think he's got. Welcome, guys. It's the Gridiron Gurus, presented by Famisphere. I'm Keith, joined by Jesse, and we have quite a bit to talk about from last week, and then hopefully we can get our picks in later. If not, we will have those out on Facebook and Twitter and TikTok. Make sure you guys go like all of those. Follow us on all our social media. We'll be posting all of that, especially if we don't get our picks in for the podcast and for YouTube. Those will be available on our socials. But anyways, getting into our what we're going to talk about today, the big thing for me, and the games last week were huge, obviously, and I'll talk also about the college football rankings and kind of what we're going to be looking for as far as the scenarios. We're going to talk about that. But the big news I want to talk about is Dan Mullen getting fired from Florida. An ugly loss to Missouri, and I think we even said last week on our show that
we did.
Wouldn't be surprised if they went to Missouri and lost because Missouri has been playing, I wouldn't say great ball, but been playing much better, a little more inspired. The running back, and his name leaves me at the moment, but has been playing really good, played great against Florida. We talked about the Stanford game, and Emory Jones had to have a perfect game. I think he threw 6 touchdowns in the contest with Stanford.
Right.
Played great in it. Didn't play as great against Missouri. But anyways, after the loss, Dan Mullen did get released from his contract, opening up yet another big job in the NCAA, one that, to be honest, at the start of the season, I didn't predict. I don't think you would have predicted it. A lot of people expected them to be in a national title picture, in the SEC East picture. Didn't really realize how good Georgia was at the time. But they had a close game with Alabama. So, the wheels just fell off of it for Mullen.
Right. And that running back from Missouri is Tyler Beatty. And I don't know what it is about Missouri. I don't know if you know this, but Tyler Beatty's a Memphis product. I don't remember the high school. He's from Memphis. And then they also have a running back on that roster from South Dole in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Right.
Elijah Young, who's a sophomore. And so, but anyways, looking at the stats for that game, Tyler Beatty, which I told you, we talked about it, last week, I expected him to have a good game, and like we said, we would not be surprised, and I was not surprised that they beat him. But he had 27 carries for 146 yards and a touchdown. He ran all over their defense. But that game, it wasn't like Missouri just throttled Florida. It was a tight game, and actually ended up taking a 2-point conversion in overtime, which I thought was a bold move by Coach Drinkwitz. But it
really was, and it was such a.
It's a gutsy call, but I like it.
It's a gutsy call, but what gets me about the call was the actual play call.
Yeah.
It's typically a rollout or something to get your quarterback on the move, to get him his eyes downfield and give him a chance to run it in if he has it on the 2-yard line. It wasn't. It was a little.
It was like a straight drop back and this little tight end pop on the left.
It was a tight end pop that it almost kind of looked like a screen.
It looked to a busted. It didn't even look like it.
Exactly.
It looked like it was a messed up play, and it was so slow developing that honestly should not have converted. It should not have gotten the job done.
No.
And which I think I had.
And I think that they run that 10 times against Florida. It probably is completed twice.
Maybe that might have been the only one they get.
Right.
But I think I sent that to you. I was like, look at this. This defense is just terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And it was. The secondary, they were, I don't know where their eyes were at, but didn't even look at that tight end. They didn't look his way.
Well, and I think it's the thing, if you think that it's going to be a rollout or whatever, they're looking for the receivers or somebody rolling across.
It was not good assignment football. But anyways,
that's why because they fired their defensive coordinator a week ago.
That's true. I think Dan Mullen kind of lasted too long. I've seen a lot of Florida fans, which kind of surprised me, but I have seen a lot of Florida fans on social media after the fire saying that this was a Tennessee-like move, that how could we do this? What are we doing? This guy's in year 4.
Right.
Okay? And by year 4, you, especially at Florida, especially at a school that has rich, fertile recruiting grounds in the state, you academically are the best university in the state. Athletically, you have the best facilities out of any university in the state. You're in the premier conference in the country. You are one of the top 2 teams of your division in the country for your conference. Excuse me. And you're in year 4. You have all that talent. You should be producing, especially after the close game with Alabama to start the season.
Right.
There's no excuse for the loss to South Carolina, the very tight win to Samford, the loss to Missouri, the loss, even though I still think it wasn't that bad of a loss, but the loss to LSU in Death Valley.
I think it's worse than what you think. But that's
I think the Kentucky loss is worse than the LSU loss.
Oh no, I think
and
it's a much
I
better
just
team.
think I think just the mystique behind it. I mean, how do you lose to Kentucky? Well, here's my point. If we play LSU, I'm talking about Tennessee right now. If we play LSU in Death Valley, we probably walk out with a loss. We went to Kentucky and beat them.
I think Tennessee would compete with LSU in Death Valley.
I don't know. I think it'd be tough. But my point was is that in year 4, this stuff shouldn't happen. So I think he lasted longer than he should have. In my opinion, I think he should have been fired after the Samford game. Actually, you probably could go back and fire him after South Carolina. He probably doesn't get on the plane home.
Yeah.
They leave him at the airport.
Honestly, I think he should have been fired after the Samford win. That's when I think you fire him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, especially when the video came out of them celebrating the win.
Yes, that was awful.
No, yeah, no. But anyways,
I'm trying to play devil's advocate here. I'm looking up Dan Mullen's coaching record at Florida, just to see.
I mean, he's improved each year, and I want to think, was it year 1? I think that they were in conversations about the playoff. Is that accurate?
I think it was. Let me see. Florida's first year in 2018, he went 10-3.
That was probably the year then.
I think it was the second year he was 11-2.
Okay.
Okay. But here's my point for Mullen.
So you go from 10. What was the year 3 last year?
8-4.
Okay.
But that was that was your COVID year.
You go 10-3, 11-2. Am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm.
10-3,
Yes.
11-2, 8-4.
Mm-hmm.
And then now they're sitting at 5-6
Yes.
with the opportunity to not even make a bowl.
Right.
If you flip that, and he starts out 5-6, 8-4, 11-2, 10-3, great.
Right.
But he's doing the opposite effect. He's regressed. He's not progressed.
He has regressed, but he is 34-15 at Florida overall.
Yeah. Okay. Take out those first 2 years, and he's what? 14-10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but still was a winning record.
4 wins.
Right, but here's my thing about firing him, and I think he should have been fired. But when you fire him, you're now entering a conversation with LSU, with USC, and it depends on what happens with Michigan. I still don't know if Harbaugh survives. I think he should at Michigan, even if it lost to Ohio State. But Michigan that job might open up, and whatever other Power 5 jobs open up. Now you're having to compete with them for coaches.
I think outside of USC, Florida's the best job open right now.
I would argue LSU is the best job open.
I don't think it is. I think that Florida has a much more, like, they have a richer tradition, better facilities, better recruiting grounds. They're in a side of the division that they can compete with much quicker than you're going to compete in the West.
Right. The West is harder than the East and the SEC.
It is.
I agree with that.
Like, whoever the right candidate that goes into that job can be in the SEC championship more often than not than whoever takes over to LSU.
LSU will be able to offer.
You have a much tougher route.
LSU can offer the same as Florida does, and you probably have more leeway as far as your outlook goes forward. because you're playing in the West. Does that make sense?
Well, I get your point. You're saying they're going to give you a little slack because of who you're. Yeah,
right. They might want you to compete at Florida year 2, whereas if you go to LSU, you may get 4 years.
I still think you're going to be
before they're expecting a national contender.
Well, and I'll argue that point with this. Look at Coach Orgeron. They're asking him to step down already, and he just won a natty 2 years ago.
Yeah, but that's a whole different situation there with him because of the off the field issues. Nothing on. I mean, on the field is what it is.
Yeah.
But where because he got him and his wife got divorced.
Right.
And then he has all the off field things.
Yeah.
That go along with because he was bringing his girlfriends and their kids to practice and
plural girlfriends.
Right. And their kids are at practice and going through drills with the team. I mean, that's just.
Yeah, that's. I get
mean,
that.
for lack of a better term, that's dumb.
Yeah.
That's just not. I mean, it's not professional.
Yeah.
Because they've got to keep their personal life separate from their professional.
Right.
And he was mixing the two, and it was showing on field.
Okay, well, let me go a different route. What about Gus Malzahn? 2 years ago. Was it 2 years
Unreal
ago?
expectations at Auburn.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, because you're in state with.
I mean, I agree. I'm not arguing that. I do think Auburn has unreal expectations.
Because you
they
had Nick
believe that
Saban
they are
not only
Alabama
in conference, but in state.
Yeah,
and he was at least competing. And now look
he
where
was
they're at.
competing.
Right.
Well, I mean, you look at the year.
He shouldn't have been fired. Is my point.
Let's see. Let me think here. It was the year that it was 18. Well, I think it might have been the 2017 season, 18 championship, and I may have it backwards. Maybe 18 season, 19 championship. I can't remember. No, I think I'm right. I think it was 17 season, 18 championship.
I think 19 was
Georgia.
LSU.
I'm thinking of the year that Georgia and Alabama both make the playoff, and they play each other. Auburn beats Alabama in the Iron Bowl, and actually beat Georgia the same year. They beat Georgia and Alabama. They beat both teams that played for the Natty that year.
Right.
They beat them both. They go to the SEC. Georgia gets the win and puts them out of the college football playoff.
Right.
And Auburn has to sit and watch both teams that they beat go to the national championship and play.
Well, that's the same year. I think they had a bad loss to.
They had a bad loss, and I don't remember with it.
I think it was an SEC team.
For some reason, I'm wanting to say South Carolina. I don't know why I'm putting that team in my head.
I think it was Missouri, but I could be wrong.
But
I feel like it was
East. Yeah, I think it was 17. But I honestly think that regardless, wherever you go in the SEC outside of maybe Vandy, you're going to be expected to win. You may not be expected to be a national championship contender, but you're going to be expected to win. But I just think that, Florida, as much as I don't like Florida, Florida is the top job in the state of Florida. It's a better job than Florida State, than Miami, than Central Florida.
And that's wild to say because, I want to argue Miami, but it's just because they're in a weaker conference, same fertile grounds, same as Florida State, but Miami has a little better tradition than Florida State. But I think you're right. I think that, let's see.
As much as I like the U, I really do. But
they had 2 losses that year, and one of them was
in the SEC title, wasn't it? Is that the one of the 2, or they had to do regular season?
They had 3.
Oh, okay.
And they actually went. Hang on. This was the year that UCF claimed
a national title.
Right.
Yeah.
They lost week 2 to Clemson, 14-6.
Okay.
They lost to LSU.
Huh. I was thinking it was okay. I thought it was an East team.
I did too. Like I said, I thought it was Missouri. They lost to LSU 27-23. They beat Georgia 40-17.
Yep.
Beat Alabama 26-14. Lost to Georgia in the SEC title.
See, go back, read those 2 scores again.
Which ones?
Georgia and Alabama. This is why I say that you don't bet. If anybody's watching, do not ever bet on Auburn football because they are such a roller coaster.
Right.
But read those 2 scores again.
Georgia was 40-17. Alabama was 26-14. Lost to Georgia in the SEC title 28-7.
That is insane. I'm still stuck on the 40-17 victory over Georgia, and I remember watching that game. Now that you mentioned it, was. I rember everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, what is happening?"
Right. Because
that Georgia team had Nick Chubb, Sony Michel. They were good.
Jake Fromm, or was it Eason?
No, I think Jake Fromm was the quarterback that year.
I think so too.
They had the Ridley boy at receiver.
Calvin.
No, not Calvin. This is his brother. I can't remember his brother's name. Calvin played at Alabama.
Yeah, you're right.
I can't remember the other Ridley. Anyway, I can't remember his first name. then they had their defense was loaded. They had what was the linebacker? He's in the league now.
Right.
Anyway, that was a loaded football team,
Mm-hmm.
and they throttled them. Then in the Iron Bowl, they did the same thing to Alabama.
Right.
And
I'm with you. 100%.
it's just it's unreal. But anyways, so my point is, Auburn was very close to making a playoff berth.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were right there.
Right.
And
I think Clemson actually made the playoff that year too.
let's see, I know it was Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, because Oklahoma and Georgia played in the Rose Bowl.
All-State Sugar Bowl.
It may have been, for some reason, I'm thinking Washington made it that year, but that may be the year before.
No, they played Alabama in the Sugar Bowl.
Who did?
Clemson.
Clemson. Okay.
So Clemson was the other team.
Okay.
So they played 3 of the 4 playoff teams and went 2-1 with a 14-6 loss or 14-7. I can't remember that score now.
That's
14-6.
unbelievable.
We're talking about 2017, obviously. And
Yeah,
then,
we're getting off the rails, but that just goes back to the whole point
and then they
of.
lost to UCF in the Peach.
Yeah, I
Peach
remember
Bowl,
that game.
34-27.
I think at that point they had just
They'd quit.
they were deflated that they weren't in the playoff.
Right.
Probably especially watching 3 teams that you've played in the regular season.
Beat 2 and played 1 tough.
Yeah, and so
I think you're right.
But I mean, you essentially played those playoff teams 4 times. You played
Right.
one twice, and
Right.
once against the other 2. But yeah, that just go. My whole point though, circling back, is that I think that regardless, that just shows how much that SEC fans are going to expect, and the programs are going to expect you to win.
Right.
Because I mean, I didn't feel like Gus Malzahn's firing was justified.
I don't believe it was either.
And
I
I
don't
really
believe it
don't
was
feel
either.
like I know there's a lot of off-field stuff going on with Coach O. So I mean, I get that. But as far as putting X's and O's, together, I don't feel like it's justified to get rid of him. But that's college football.
Well,
And
for me, whenever you mix the two, his personal life and his
And
professional.
that I can understand. So I
Right.
mean, I'm not going to say much there. But then Dan Mullen, man, anytime you're regressing like that,
I agree.
I think that.
I agree. And he may have lost the locker room as well, and I think the boosters may have seen that.
Well, I think he did. I really think that the locker room was gone because you could tell in
The
the
Missouri
games,
game? Missouri
especially
game?
the Missouri game,
I seen that
when
too.
he would try to talk to any of the players, it was like they were just
Right.
kind of
I
ignoring
believe
him.
one of our guys in one of our groups had mentioned that too.
He did,
Like,
yeah.
just look at it. I think it was Marcus.
Yeah.
Marcus Birchfield. He was like, man, he's not even got control of his team on the sideline.
Yeah.
But I'm going to stay on Dan Mullen just for a second. Do you think that any Power 5 team will hire him as a head coach?
Power 5, I do think there will be one down the road. Do I think there's a Power 5
No, I'm
job
talking
open
about this year. I'm talking about
No.
this year. I
To
don't-
be
I don't
honest,
either.
I don't know that if I'm Dan Mullen, and I'm gonna promote another podcast here, but I was actually listening to Late Kick by Josh Pate just the other day, maybe yesterday actually, and he talked about Dan Mullen. He talked about this whole situation, and his whole argument, and I agree with it. I totally agree with it. Is Dan Mullen doesn't need to take a coaching job right away. Because
I
Kevin
agree.
Sumlin messed up in this. If you remember, Kevin Sumlin got fired by A&M,
A&M, right?
and he immediately took another job at Arizona, which was in a terrible spot, and tried to dig him out of a hole. Couldn't dig him out. The hole just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and he may have ruined his career.
Right.
He may never coach again.
Right.
Or if he does, it's going to be somewhere so low that he may never recover. Dan Mullen needs to take time away. He needs to do the Chip Kelly move. He needs to go get into a studio as an analyst somewhere, stay there for a little while,
Right.
and then come back maybe to a big group of 5 or maybe a small Power 5 and build his way back up because he's a good ball coach.
Right.
I think he let the job get a little too big for him.
Right.
He went from Mississippi State where football is, yes, they're football fans. Yes, I'm not discrediting that. But the most well-known football players I can name are Dak Prescott and Jeffrey Simmons. And those have been recently. Those
Right.
were actually Dan Mullen's players.
Right.
So, nobody did anything until he got there.
Right.
So, he went from that to a big spotlight like Florida,
Right.
where championships are expected.
Right.
And so I think that he needs
In a
to
weaker,
go.
weaker side of the conference.
Yeah, and so I think he needs to go be an analyst for a little while. And
I would argue. I mean, I see what you're saying. To get into an analyst spot, something like that, I would argue that he needs to go be not a grad assistant, but maybe an OC or quarterback coach at a big at a Power 5.
Now, if he could
step down and be under a head coach that not really is established, but has fundamental control of his locker room.
Yeah. Now Lane Kiffin did this, and this is where I'm going to go with that.
Right. That was the route I was going.
Yeah. If he could go be OC for Nick Saban at Alabama, if I'm Nick Saban, I'm wanting him.
Well, that's the Nick Saban protocol. Is you get guys that maybe had trouble or whatever.
Look at Bill O'Brien, who I think is tanking right now.
Right. Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin.
Yeah.
He had Butch Jones as a
quality control analyst,
some kind of analyst,
offensive analyst or something.
Right. And I think he had Charlie Strong on that same staff.
Yeah.
Charlie Strong was
it was loaded with head coaches.
Right. And I'm going to say this, kind of going off the rail, but that's what Scott Frost is dealing with at Nebraska. He was doing the same thing. He was getting not the same caliber coach, but he was getting those guys as analysts. And then when the doors are closed, those guys can coach.
Yeah.
No, there's no media there to report you. And now that he's not winning, that kind of is getting out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what Saban does. Is when the doors are closed, those guys can coach all they want to. So, but anyways, that's what Dan Mullen for me needs to do. Is he needs to go be not really an analyst. I think he's above that. But, as a quarterback coach or an OC under somebody that has more fundamental control. Maybe like South Carolina under Beamer.
Oh, man.
But that's the comparison I would make.
Yeah.
Because Beamer has his locker room.
He does. But that's some risky business if I'm Dan Mullen. Because here's the thing. If you go to one of these places
mm-hmm.
and you don't produce a good offensive product,
right,
then that reflects on you. It doesn't reflect poorly on the head coach. That reflects on you.
Well, it does, but not as much as it does on you.
Yeah, it doesn't reflect as much. Dan Mullen came in here as an OC. He's supposed to be this and that. He shouldn't be a head coach. He can't, Right. And I think the ADs are too afraid to hire some people based on the reaction of the fan base. And I'll say this too. I think it has gotten worse. The ADs, their thoughts of the fan reaction has gotten worse since the whole Tennessee and Greg Schiano fiasco.
Oh yes, that was.
I think that.
I think you're right.
I think that completely changed the way that ADs hire now.
Right.
And you're seeing that.
Right. I agree.
And that's why I think that these jobs that are open, they could sit open for a good portion of we may be looking at February. It may be right before National Signing Day before some of these jobs get filled.
Well, and I want to agree, but then I want to disagree because of the reason I want to disagree is you get your early signing day and you've got all the other stuff that is now in place that if you don't have a head coach,
well, they're all going to have an interim. They're gonna name an interim. I just don't know that they'll have a true head coach.
You're talking about Florida.
I'm talking about Florida, LSU, and USC.
Right.
I don't know that either one of those three will have a real head coach
assigned in contract because the guys that you're going to want are either going to be playing around New Year's.
Right, and ideally you want to have a guy. You want to have a guy hired because what is the biggest media day for college football? Well, other than National Signing Day, what from now until National Signing Day, what's the biggest media spotlight that you can have? It's the national championship.
It's your New Year's Six Bowls.
Yeah. You want to have a guy in place by then because then that's all you hear. That's all they talk about.
Right.
Look at Josh Heupel when he got hired at UCF.
Right.
The entire game when UCF played Auburn. Was Auburn that year?
I think so.
The entire game, all they talked about was Josh Heupel. Yeah, well, Josh Heupel, blah, blah. And they just kept showing him up in the box.
Mm-hmm.
That you want to have a guy ideally by then. That way you have some media attention.
Right. Well, the same thing whenever Pruitt got hired at Tennessee, because Alabama was in the national title, I believe, and they kept cutting to the defensive coordinator from Alabama, which was Jeremy Pruitt, and has signed to be the head coach of Tennessee. All this, so I mean, it is good. It is good press. We're going to move on from that because that did take us a little while. We actually hit on some of the open jobs that we were going to talk about. We're going to talk about some of the games that happened last week, and we talked about the Ohio State-Michigan State game last week and how I think the line was like 19, and I think I said I'd bet the under on the overall. I think it was like 59.
Yeah.
I'd have been way off. I think the score at halftime of that game was 49-7. Ohio State.
There was no points for Michigan State. I think it was either 42 or 49-0.
Did they get 7? That's by the end of the game.
I think so, but they didn't score at halftime. They hadn't. Their offense didn't do anything at halftime.
Well, and you mentioned even on this show is it's depending on how well the Michigan State secondary plays the corners.
Yeah, that was not good
because that was their weak point, and Ohio State exposed that.
Oh yeah, they attacked that. They did eventually score 7. That's all.
I thought I seen 7 on the final. I guess I thought that may have been halftime. I think the final was 56-7.
It was.
Yeah.
I'm actually trying to figure out. I guess I'm not going to be able to see it, but I'm pretty sure that score at halftime was either 42 or 49-0.
I might be able to pull it up.
But yeah, I actually talked about too when we left. I was like, I'm gonna go bet on Michigan State to cover.
Right,
and I think I did, and
I think
I
we
lost.
Talked about it. We both
here it is. It was 49-0.
At half.
49-0. Yeah, and
Lovely.
Michigan State didn't score 7 until the fourth quarter. So, anyway.
Yeah, it was an absolute beatdown, and it makes me want to. And we'll do our picks later, and we'll talk about the Michigan and Ohio State game. It's one of those things of I don't know what the spread is, but if it's anywhere close, I would almost be willing to bet Ohio State to cover. I think Ohio State's going to win this game.
I don't think Jim Harbaugh does not have a chance. If Michigan pulls this game off, I will finally give Jim Harbaugh some credit.
I want to hear this.
I will finally say Jim Harbaugh is a quality. I will finally say Jim Harbaugh is a decent coach if he can pull this game off.
Okay, hang on. I got the spread right here on it, just so.
I'm
betting Ohio State to cover.
But
I'm betting Ohio State to cover.
What's the line?
8.5 or 8.
8.
Ohio State by
8.
8.
They're putting way too much value
over under 64.5.
I'm gonna be honest. I think that Ohio State is minimum up by 14 by halftime. Minimum.
Maybe we'll see.
I mean, look at what I just don't How do you look at what Ohio State does to Michigan State? Okay.
Right.
And you look at all the trouble that Michigan had stopping Kenneth Walker, who, by the way, on Michigan State's defense, Kenneth Walker only ran for 25 yards.
Didn't do anything.
They couldn't do anything with Kenneth Walker. And Ohio State just shut him down. And then Michigan's secondary couldn't stop Michigan State's passing game. And they have no passing game. And then I'm
wondering how many. I'm gonna look up how many yards that the Michigan State threw against. Oh, Michigan. That's what I'm gonna look up.
Against Michigan.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now.
Okay. But I also want to know. Tell me the stat line of how many yards Michigan had through the air against Michigan State.
406.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it was a quiet day. Okay. I mean, I know that the secondary was bad, but it didn't seem like it was 400. Did they have turnovers? Well, how did they?
One. They threw one pick.
That was the game winner. That was the game-winning pick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
They each had 2 turnovers. They had Michigan had a fumble and a pick. Michigan State threw for 196 yards on Michigan. They rushed for 200.
They had 158 yards against Ohio State. Michigan State did. The team only ran for 66 yards combined.
Right.
And that's between 3 running backs. But Ohio State threw for 449 yards and 6 touchdowns against Michigan State.
Right.
I mean, that secondary is terrible.
It is terrible.
And I said that before. It's terrible. I even said that the week after they beat Michigan.
Right.
that
It's
can't believe
terrible.
they won because that secondary was awful.
Right.
But
I'm with you, man. I'm not disagreeing with any of your points. I'm just putting it in perspective. That's the thing.
I can't wait to talk about that next week then. See what
Right.
happens.
Absolutely. And this is going to be the game to watch, I think, this week. Well, there's a
I
couple-
always like watching that game anyway.
It is. It's hate-filled, and especially this year with the playoffs on the line.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very interesting game. The other game that we talked about, and I even said it on air, I'll probably take Utah to beat Oregon, and I picked Oregon to win. I don't know why I did that. Utah just dismantled.
bad.
Utah dismantled
Bad.
Oregon. It was awful. But
Well,
and that killed their playoff chances.
I said on the show that it was going to be close. That because I think you asked me, you said, well, if Oregon had a 14-point lead, if they were projected to win by 14, who do you take? And I said I take Utah to cover
Right.
because I thought it was going to be a close game.
Right. I think the line was
And
like
maybe
3.
said 10. Maybe said 10 because I don't feel like I feel like 14 was too much. But anyways, I said Utah.
Right.
And
The line was Utah by 3, and they covered that.
yeah, I
a
thought
lot.
Oregon had that no problem.
Right.
But man, I don't
We were
know.
both wrong. We were
Very
both wrong on that one.
Very wrong.
But Utah is apparently a very good team.
Oregon just killed their playoff hopes.
Right.
They're gone.
Right.
All gone.
Another team that killed their whole conference's playoff chances was Wake Forest losing to Clemson.
Yep.
And we talked about, you said Clemson cannot take a loss. And I was like, well, it's Wake Forest. Wake Forest is pretty daggone good. And I can't remember the final score. I think they beat them by 2 scores. I mean, it was a good game, but Clemson just dismantled Wake Forest and killed the ACC's chances to be represented in the playoffs.
And I think this week they can't take a loss either, because Dabo needs. What's that put them at? Are they 8-3 now? They can finish at 9-3.
I think so.
I think that's right. With a win over South Carolina, they'd finish it.
That's the thing, though, is Beamer's got it going up, but Clemson cannot take a loss,
No, you
especially
can't
to an
lose.
SEC
Well,
an
you're-
SEC team.
You're sitting with.
The ones at the bottom of the
Do
barrel.
they have
anyways.
3 losses on the year? They do, because they lost to Georgia, right? They lost
They are
to
at
Georgia.
8. They're 8-3 right now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you can't take a loss. You got 3 losses already on the year. You can't take a loss to your biggest rival,
Clemson,
especially when your biggest rival has been the little brother for so many years.
for so many years. Clemson is favored in the game 11.5.
Yeah, that's.
I would probably take Clemson to cover
I don't know. Maybe
because
I don't
he
know. It's
has
gonna be
to.
interesting.
He's actually got them ranked again.
He
They're-
really
they're
needs to win
23.
big. He needs to win big.
He needs to win big. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Is he needs this more than South Carolina needs it?
He does. What's South Carolina's record? Are they bowl eligible
They're
yet?
6-5.
Okay, so
That's what I was. That was my other point to
if
this.
they
is
were fine for bowl eligibility,
if they were sitting at
then
5
I
and
would say
6,
look out.
right? But they're both eligible. I don't see any way that they can win that game.
I may still
Um,
pick them for fun. I don't know. We'll see.
South Carolina,
I'm considering. Is that on our board?
it is.
I'm considering, but we'll see when we get there.
Right. That's for on down the road. But anyway, so hopefully we'll get our picks in when this show drops. We're supposed to have somebody on, but if time doesn't permit, we'll get together and drop that with the podcast and YouTube. So, but anyways, till next time, guys.